Good morning, East Coasters. Good afternoon and evening, all those across the pond. This is your Music Biz Passport. This is a second in the series of our Passport series that we started just last month. This series is supposed to connect countries around the world and talk about the music opportunities in those regions and how folks here in the US and folks abroad can connect and do business and understand the cultures and the music climates in other countries. So we started off with a strong presentation by the Nordic regions, and today we are here to learn more about the Latin music market. I'm extremely interested in listening in on this one myself. It's a region that very much interests me. I learn something new every time I hear about the region. It's so diverse. So we're very excited to have Jamie Rodriguez of Jrodconcerts Media. We have Anamaria Sayre. She is the co-host of NPR's Alt Latino. And we have Emilio Morales of Rimas Publishing, who is also a Music Biz board member. We also have a conversation coming up in a few short weeks at Music Biz 2024. It is, that's our annual conference in Nashville, May 13th through the 16th. And part of our Sync Symposium that's sponsored this year by Paramount will include a conversation about sync in the Latin genre. So that's an interesting conversation as well. So if you're going to be on hand in Music Biz at Music Biz 2024, please do stop by that sync symposium and learn more about sync and in the Latin genre. So with that said, I am going to open up the floor and let Jamie take over and start us off today. I want to thank Jamie, Anamaria, and Emilio for being here. And there is Q&A, so hit these guys up with your questions about the market. Use your Q&A features here on the platform to ask them questions and to react to what they're talking about. So thank you all for being here. And Jamie, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and hello, everybody, and welcome to the emergence of Latin music into multi-genres. And so thrilled to be here. And first of all, thank you, all of you, for giving us some of your time. Time is the most precious commodity, and we don't take it lightly. And we hope you take some value from this. We have some great panelists today, and I'm about to introduce them. So I think what we'll do is each one of us is we're going to go through a little bit of history of Latin music in the United States, Anglo market up to this point. And then each one of us will take a little section, and then there will be a Q&A for all of you as we wrap it up. But let me introduce the wonderful team that we have here today. First of all, I love her. I've been a huge fan for a long time. Anamaria Sayre. She's the co-host of NPR's Alt Latino Music. She's a pioneer, I think, and she has been celebrating Latin music and culture at NPR since 2010. As a multimedia producer for NPR Music, she is focused on elevating the diversity of sounds and stories that defined Latinx culture. And in addition to just gossiping and chismeando and music news with her co-host Felix Contreras, she spends her time curating Latin artists at the Tiny Desk, the famous Tiny Desk concert series. Anamaria's producing credits include concerts from artists like Nicky Nicole, Camila Cabello, and a lot more. And in addition to her work at NPR Music, Anamaria has appeared on many acclaimed NPR news shows and podcasts, including Weekend Edition, Pop Culture Happy Hour, All Songs Considered, and so much more. She is from Southern California, and she's an avid lover of mountains, beaches, and stories that pair with one of her abuela's cafecitos as well. Next, we also have Emilio Morales. Emilio is the managing editor of Rimas Publishing, a Puerto Rican-based musical powerhouse, home to over 120 internationally acclaimed authors and producers, including global phenomenon Bad Bunny. Just last year, Emilio was recognized at the annual Music Biz conference here in Nashville as a next gen leader that is gonna propel the Latin music and the industry forward. And Rimas Publishing has been at the forefront of many of the things that are happening in music right now, including mergers with AI technology, and he has other top achievements include back-to-back Publisher of the Year title at the Billboard Latin Music Awards, Best Música Urbana Album at the 2023 Grammy Awards, and Best Urban Music Album at the 2022 Latin Grammy Awards. So, Emilio has been at the forefront of all this, and we're so thrilled to have him. And last but not least, yours truly, I am the founder of Jrodconcerts Media, a music media company founded in 2019. I was in Miami radio top 40 at Y100 for many years, started in 2005. And in 2019, what started as a podcast has evolved into a multimedia a company that produces other podcasts, cover music festivals, and does concert films. Our flagship program is called Jrodconcerts, the podcast, which is a top 50 interview podcast in the US. Well, we've interviewed musical icons, up and coming, musical stars, and current hit makers. And so we're so thrilled to have all of you here. So let's start before I give it to Ana Maria, and she can take us on her beautiful journey. Let's talk a little bit about the Latin music and its influence. How did we get here, basically? A little, very quick refresher. Like many genres, Latin music in its entirety has never stopped evolving. It's a very fluid genre. It only continues to innovate. It's paved the way for new subgenres with eclectic compositions. And it all started in the late 1800s when Afro-Cuban and Afro-Caribbean music was being performed in salon band ensembles, basically. Initially, these acts were primarily done in cultural celebrations, but were soon being performed in a variety of spaces, including in New York ballrooms. In the 1930s, the music made its way slowly into the mainstream American pop culture, and it started to be commercially distributed as well. From then, it only continued to grow in popularity, introducing a new era of music into the US. So, Latin musicians have always been part of pop culture. I think in the 60s, Carlos Santana was the first big name that kind of stomped into the pioneer kind of Latin jazz world and became a household name. His influences are still felt today, Carlos Santana's. And Latin jazz is one of the most notable forms of music that's influenced American music too. The complexity then took part in Latin music, made its way into other genres. This is the first time that it started seeping into other parts, especially house music. The genre found its roots within Latin freestyle movement, which was popularized in the 80s with artists such as the Cover Girls, the Latin Rascals, and more. And these elements started incorporating percussions, congas, timbales, woodblocks, cowbells, and bongos that had always been part of our culture's music. Then, we moved to the 90s a little bit, where there was another big swing as we kind of started getting into American music. And, it wouldn't be right to talk to you guys without mentioning Selena, of course, Selena Quintanilla, master of cumbia on bossa nova. And she was really the first Latinx artist with 4 number 1 singles in 1994. She was also the first one with a number 1 album, which was partially sung in Spanish. All this was groundbreaking. After her tragic passing, however, her legacy continued to move, and Luis Miguel kind of carried that baton, known as the Latin Frank Sinatra. He eventually collaborated with Frank Sinatra himself with "Come Fly with Me," and that was like a major thing, which took us to 1998, the Soccer World Cup in France, 1998, and the theme song for that worldwide event was done by Ricky Martin. Of course, he did that La Copa de la Vida, and this was like a huge kind of breakthrough as well. He eventually took this, released his first English album, and this took us to the new millennium, which was a major thing with Jennifer Lopez. I think Jennifer Lopez kind of took us to the next level. Her debut album, On the Six, quickly made its way up the Billboard Top 10 albums, and Latin music at this point, the train was on its way. There was kind of no stopping it. As the mid 2000s kind of started happening, and this was when I started kind of doing Miami radio, Shakira started crossing over, and Enrique Iglesias. And of course, Shakira was already beloved in the Latin world for many years with her Spanish, when she was young, with her Spanish songs. But with Laundry Service, it was an all Anglo album. And the album gained massive attention, going triple platinum. And to this day, even though it's her most popular, it eventually took her to Oral Fixation 2 and Hips Don't Lie with Wyclef Jean, which became the highest selling single in the 21st century, straight up. So the world's love for Latin music has only grown since then. I mean, Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee's Despacito, who doesn't remember that song when it burst into the scene in 2017? It became YouTube's most viewed video within a year of its release. And it also tied the record for the longest duration that a song had remained in the Billboard's Hot 100 #1 spot. So songs like Despacito also started kind of creating a curiosity in American people, with people just kind of asking, what does this word mean, or how do I dance this style? So pop culture started to become more and more ingrained. And then lastly, in the last couple of years, we have reached a new era of Latin trap, or trapeton, which has danceable tunes, a mixture of Latin hip hop and reggaeton. Bad Bunny, of course, a pioneer, which we'll talk about it a lot. And artists like Cardi B and J Balvin have taken us to this place. And excited to kind of pass it over to Anamaria now, because she has been at the forefront of kind of like expanding this to a national audience. Anamaria, take it away.
Hi, thanks so much everyone for coming today. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me too. And for such a good overview of what this kind of really interesting journey of seeing Latin music emerge in, the mainstream pop space, quote unquote. I always say that with quotation marks, because a lot of different music has mattered to a lot of different parts of the world for a long time. It doesn't just matter, what's topping global or the US charts or what's in like the big pop space. So yeah, I think I have a slide if you want to throw it up. This is just like a little bit of a visual overview of kind of what my findings have been, reporting on kind of what is happening in the current space based on what's happened in the past. I think my main thing that I love to say is like, let's forget the term crossover as it applies to now. I think it was so relevant, in all of this history that we just heard recounted. It was super, super important and something that brought, Latino, Spanish speaking artists to a larger stage for the first time. But at this point, those two things are one and the same. Bad Bunny, Karol G, all of these names, they exist easily, seamlessly, naturally on the global charts, on the US charts. They're known in households in the United States, in addition, of course, to across Latin America. So to me, very much whatever we would refer to as the crossover, it's happened. There's successfully been a crossover, and we're here to stay. But I think what I would love to talk about is a little bit of what is the nuance of what's happening beyond just, people knowing Titi Me Preguntó in the club in the US. And that's kind of like what I see as a global expansion of music coming out of Latin America, the Latin American diaspora, in every direction. So I kind of have like three key things that I've found, both in my reporting, in what I know about Tiny Desk, which is a global platform where we have a lot of Latin American artists. And the first is kind of this integration into the mainstream pop space, which, like I mentioned, I think really goes beyond just your biggest names existing in a kind of in every place in the world. And first, what I kind of wanted to mention is what I see as there was a seeping in of Latin sound before we actually saw, Bad Bunny top US or global charts. To me, one of the first instances of the dembow in the US is actually Justin Bieber's Sorry. If you listen to that track, there's a very distinct borrowing of that sound. And so it was something I think that a US market, a global market, was very much excited, interested, and ready to receive and consuming before they even knew what they were consuming. I don't think anyone would tell you, I was listening to Dembo when I was listening to Justin Bieber, but that is what essentially made that song effectively such a hit. So there's that integration of the sound that has continued to be popularized. I mean, you see all kinds of, in the past few years, what you think of as typical American mainstream pop artists, let's say Billie Eilish or The Weeknd, singing in Spanish, singing on Latin music, quote unquote, tracks. So kind of disrupting the idea of what is Latin music, which I think is what is consistently happening across the market. And on the other side of that, there's artists like Karim Leon, for example, who is traditionally seen as a regional Mexican artist who has always played with global sounds. I would say he's always been, to me, a bit more of a world music artist than just strictly regional, but he's been on a whole kind of thing recently of releasing country style. He collaborated recently with Kane Brown, a well-known country artist. He collaborated with Leon Bridges. Maluma, he's been collaborating all across both Latino artists and then generally across the world with all kinds of sounds. And I don't think he is the only one to be doing that. I think he's a big name to be doing it right now. But there are all kinds of artists who are making music that is collaborating with artists that we traditionally think of as more American pop artists and doing that here. And that's beyond reggaeton. That's really in a lot of different genres that exist within the Latin music space or within the Spanish language space. So we're really seeing it come into this country and by extension to the rest of the world in all different spaces, in all different styles, not just, you know, what we would think of when we think Latin music on the pop chart. So there's that. There's an expanding diaspora, which is exciting and interesting and explains a lot, in my opinion. You know, my co-host and myself, we did a 3-part series on regional Mexican music towards the end of last year, talking about the explosion of the music. And one of the key things we discovered is our hypothesis is part of why this music is expanding, especially a genre like regional, is expanding at such a rapid rate, is actually more to do with the Latinos that exist and are growing in this country. We specifically traveled to Nashville. That photo that I have on the top left of that little expanding diaspora section is from a Peso Pluma concert in Nashville, which was sold out in a big amphitheater. And we discovered that, you know, 20% of the population in Nashville is Latino or going to be Latino in like 30 or 40% of school-age children. So it's like a really rapidly expanding population that it's all over the country. I mean, I can speak to, you know, for the Tiny Desk, we have statistics that 30% of our American audience is Latino. So we're seeing, as our population grows in this country, by extension, music that matters to us, matters to our communities, is finding more of a space here. And also, I think there's a shift in culture where people are more proud and excited to consume music, their parents' music, their grandparents' music, music from their country of origin. And so we're seeing that not only happening here, but also, you know, I included a photo of Rawayana there, who came to perform a Tiny Desk. They're a Venezuelan band that are part of this really big, I talk about this a lot, this diaspora from Venezuela of all of these young people who came from Venezuela, are living in all parts of the world now, and are making music that speak to their experience being Venezuelans growing up in the generation that they did. And so there's Venezuelans all over the world, right, who are excited and proud to consume Rawayana's music and music from bands like them because it speaks to their experience. So there's really, yes, it might be that, you know, people constantly ask me, why is regional blowing up? And it might be that there's, you know, your average American person you would think of as a stereotypical American is listening to it. But I think more so it's likely that it's just this diaspora, a lot of these young people growing up and ready to consume music. And then the third piece of this is actually taking this music and sending it back home. So part of the series that we did, you know, we also covered Yaritza y su Esencia, which was a band that is a Mexican-American band who at the time was coming under a lot of fire for some comments they made about Mexico, about the food, disparaging the food, which was controversial in Mexico. But so it's tricky, it's sticky, it's hard, I think, to take music here and bring it back home. But there's a lot of, you know, American-born Latinos who are tapping into this music, creating this music, and then actually emerging back into the Latin American space. And, you know, it might be surface level controversial, but I can say, for example, for the Tiny Desk, 20% of our YouTube audience is from a Spanish speaking country, which is massive and speaks to the fact that Latinos are consuming not only US born Latin music in high quantities, but also just a lot of different styles of music. I mean, I've had people across Latin America tell me their favorite Tiny Desk is Mac Miller, or it's an artist who isn't playing in Latin sounds. But the point is like we're seeing that intercambio, like the exchange back across the border. And so all of these things, I mean, it's expanding in every possible direction, of course, within Latin America. But I think there's a really interesting conversation happening on both sides of the border that it includes all types of music. It includes, you know, what kind of bands like Rawayana are doing, what Yaritza y Su Esencia is doing with regional. I mean, it's not limited to one style, to reggaeton, to a dembow. So it's a really interesting and exciting moment in the space.
Wow, super interesting, Anna. Thank you. Thank you. Before I toss it over to Emilio, I'll talk a little bit about Latin music here in Nashville, right, where we're based, and what we're seeing here with country and with Americana. And it is so interesting because just from when we came here to, establish ourselves here before the pandemic, there has been a notable shift in interest just on the demographics of my audience. I can tell that it's Hispanic. So, preparing for this conference, I started to delve a little bit deeper into what I could find, and I find some fascinating stuff. Specifically, wanted to thank the CMA, the Country Music Association, because they led us into some really interesting data from their members. But just piggybacking of what Ana said, I mean, Latino singers is here to stay. It's just part of the normal of music, and the audiences, the demographics are starting to creep into what was historically, white dominated industries, or we're seeing this in other genres that were unheard of, like interest in folk music and Americana music as well. So, the CMA was generous with providing some snapshots into their demographics, and the data was unmistakable. According to a 2018 they did with the GIK Consumer Life Survey, over 3 million Hispanic American adults ages 18 plus listen to country music. That's 9% 5-year growth rate. So you start, analyzing these numbers, and you start seeing a pattern. The percentage of country listeners in U.S. regions, of course, is varied all over the country, but an interesting data point is that Hispanic listeners who listen to at least one country music song a month, all of the regions in the US are over 50%. I mean, in the Southeast, like Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas, it's 50%. Here in the South, Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, 60%. In California, 49%, and in the Midwest, Colorado region, 58%. So this is people that listen to country music more than once a month. Again, I mean, we're talking about, a genre that, at least when I was a child, I didn't have, it wasn't normal, but we're seeing that, like, the tastes go both ways. People know who friend of our show Lainey Wilson is. People know who Miranda Lambert is. It's just crossing over to both sides of the thing. And we got a really interesting snapshot of the typical Hispanic country music listener. And, just expanding on what Anamaria said, a lot of it is very parallel to just, the typical, millennial, Gen Xer, or young, whatever, Gen Z listener. I mean, the snapshot of the Hispanic country music listener, 72% own a home, which is over 67% of the general population. 51% are employed full-time, which is over 48% of the general population. 49% are employed as an executive or professional. 47% have households with children, and 35% have graduated college. So I think it's, you can say that the next generation of Hispanic, high earners are country music listeners. You can reach that conclusion. The average Hispanic country music listener average household income is $81,000, which is over the 78,000 of the general population. And 68% of Hispanic millennials that listen to country earn $100,000 or more at country music. So, we start seeing this pattern. We start seeing that, Hispanic audiences that are educated and of all sorts of life are also integrating themselves into genres that, previously were unheard of. And Hispanic country listeners are tech forward. 88% use the smartphone. 64% spend 5 hours online weekly. 53% visit social networks multiple times a day. 25% have an assistant like Alexa or something in their house. And 23% are willing to spend to make home smart. So it's clear that as Latin music has become a global force in the past decade, also country music has started to take note that their audiences at CMA Fest and ACM Awards and everything is also starting to become a little bit more mixed. People like Blake Shelton, they started like their work with, with Cuban American superstar Pitbull on songs like Get Ready. Kane Brown collaborated with Mexican American singer Becky G on the reggaeton mix of Lost in the Middle of Nowhere. And Carrie Underwood sang in Spanish with David Bisbal as well, Tears of Gold. So I think that this was really interesting, as we toss it to Emilio, that the demographics here, very gratefully shared by the CMA, are showing clearly that the growing demographics of Hispanics in the U.S. population are seeping into folk, seeping into Americana, and seeping into country music in droves, and it's only going to continue to grow.
That's amazing. Jamie, do you hear me well? Got me. Perfect. Okay, so I find that I agree with Ana Maria's statement that what is going what is the current status of the expansion of this musical genre is definitely way more than just the reggaeton urbano thing that has been exploding the nightclubs all over the place, and I agree with Jamie's assessment of the demographics. It's I think that for starters, uh, I'd have to say that I think there's there has been in the past 15 to 20 years, in my personal experience as a musician. First, I'm a classically trained composer, arranger, and orchestrator that works on a principally reggaeton urbano company, but we are expanding our own horizons now. Um, I think that what I've seen is that not only on the creator side, but on the industry side, there's a scenario that has been going, and it has created the space for the because so far we've been able to hear this incredible interesting analytics on what has been uh, 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 demonstrated, and what is the current status of things. When we go into the how did we come to this, I think there was a mixture of factors into that formula, and definitely not only the listeners and the consumption side, and not only the creator sides, but also the whole industry has been creating the spaces for the Latino community to also, be on board in the respective transmission mediums, and the ways to distribute the music, to market it. I think that it's been greatly important. I remember the first time we had a Latino in a Spotify. The first time we had a Latino in a Pandora. That was really important within the community, because those kind of things created not only a sensation of a little bit of hope for the Latino creators, but also it created kind of the created kind of the necessary um, um, vision, and visibility of a something that was always there, but it was very underrated. And I think that it's been very important that people have been in the industry sector also with a lot of difficulties. I have to put that disclaimer on there, opening the doors to creators from the and employees on the Latino from the Latino community. I think that's a very important factor. Um, uh, for us as a company, we rely on things like that to be able to achieve the mission and objectives of a music publisher. Our principal milestone or goal with any creator that we work with. We have 140 of them from more than 10 countries, and almost all of those countries are Latin countries, and our main goal is just to achieve their dreams and try to facilitate their creative dreams to be achieved. So I think that in order for us to do that, we have been blessed to work in an industry that has changed a lot inside, and it has definitely helped us achieve things that I think uh, wouldn't be possible 50, 60, 70 years ago. Um, I think that that openness and it's that openness hasn't necessarily been achieved easily. There's all sorts of social and cultural things going on inside if each country. So I think that at least in the United States, there's been a lot of advances in the last few years, and that has definitely helped a lot. There's still a lot to be done, but I think that for people to give us, I remember the 5 years ago, we were trying to achieve a mega joint effort with one of the DSPs, and it was back in those days. It was a very important leap of faith from the DSP, and I think that it takes a lot of trust in the when you're working with the creator, their teams, their publishers, their labels, their management, and the DSPs themselves. I think that trust is a very important thing. You have to open the doors, and uh, definitely it wouldn't be possible if we still had the walls, the cultural, racial walls that we are always trying to defy. Everyone that is trying to achieve something good in life, right? So it wouldn't be possible. Uh, so what we are doing since day one is we are trying to. I mean, in the case of Bonnie, if he wants to do something in Japan, well, we cross and we try to defy those walls in every single element that we might encounter in the industry, in everything uh, in between. So we've been trying to do that across collaborations, and we have successfully done things with. I remember the Drake collaboration, Mia. uh, I remember a Japanese artist doing a cover of Bad Bunny in Spanish. um, and she even took Spanish classes to do that cover. And we have always tried to just defy the barriers and walls that are keeping the human race from evolution in all senses. So I think it's primarily something very important to defy those limits, and there's a lot to be learned when one opens the doors to that. Um, uh, I think that the way that we distribute things nowadays, from the label publisher side to the DSPs and etc. We think that at first it required that openness and that willingness to open the doors to us. We were the first successful label doing campaigns for more, working on campaigns for more than a year with big DSPs back in the day. At least on the independent side, we keep on doing that, and we're working on the future of things right now. We're working with labels that are principally mainstream rap, hip hop oriented, or Mexican corrido oriented. We are working on the future of what the soundtrack of our lives is going to be. So I think that for that to happen and that distributions to be successful, it's just a matter of willingness and openness to, you know, defy one's barriers and the cultural difficulties that defy the human race. On the data side, I would say that I agree perfectly with what Jamie and Anamaria said. I think that there's still a lot to be seen. I principally think that, like Anamaria said, that a lot has to be seen still on the non-urban and reggaeton approaches to the Latino music, and I hope that this definitely continues to grow and expand, because all we are doing right now is, for the creators, is basically just leveraging with the quality of their work a visibility on the industry side and on markets that, you know, people that wouldn't have listened to Latin music before, they are starting to listen to it, and all we are doing is just kind of create the avenues for that, you know. So we have been working on collaborations with companies from all the, you know, the worldwide, on a worldwide basis, to create the avenues for that, you know. So I do think we have been signing, Anamaria, we have been signing acts on the Latin jazz. We have been signing new talents on the folk acoustic spaces. I have one I love, Andrea Cruz, that she's an NPR Tiny Desk, one of your invited guests. So thank you for opening the doors to creating these spaces for the continuation of this growth. And I think that it's very important that we keep on educating the people. That's what I'm doing every day, really. I go to conferences all over the world, and I'm just saying to people, hey, Fania was a big thing in the 70s. Bob Marley is a Jamaican guy. He was a Caribbean guy. I live 2 hours from his house. So I mean, these guys were. It's a matter of visibility, really, that is needed nowadays with the new trends, and it's a matter of openness. And if you really love the music, you have to hear it. You know, you have to open your ears to that, and your heart to it. So that's I think that's my principal points here. If one is on the music business, you have to be on it with open ears and an open heart. So in order to achieve big things, it's very important that we keep on leveraging with the creators. I think that the quality has always been there. You know, like Fania, they were incredible. You know, you still hear those albums, and it's still incredible. I sometimes hear salsa from nowadays, and I think there's a lot to be to be achieved still, to get that sound, that fat sound from the 70s, and but it's a funny thing that nowadays, we have been expanding also on the data side, on the measurement side. I think that the Latin music wasn't measured as well, also. So it's very important that we acknowledge that, and that we keep on measuring this industry better, and that we keep on empowering it much better.
Right on. Amazing, Emilio. Thank you. Let's open up the floor to questions. Aaron, if anybody has a question, or in the meantime, while someone pops up a question, I'd like to ask Anna, what it's like. NPR has always been, at the forefront of like what's cool and what's edgy and what's trendy. I mean, Robin and All Things Considered, and and the end of year list. It's been like, it's a tastemaker for the industry. It's been for a few decades now. What has it been like for you, Anna, just kind of being part of that family and seeing kind of like Latin music kind of like seeping into a cultural institution more and more? Like, has there been excitement? Like, what's it been like from the inside?
Yeah, I think short answers. I have a lovely, very talented team with a lot of diverse interests and ideas and listening habits. I think the majority of people on the team listen to everything. And so, I think there's a lot of excitement about Latin music from Latin America, from the Spanish speaking world. I think, obviously there's been an intentional effort, definitely on my part, definitely on my co-host Felix's part. That's what we do is we turn people onto that. But I would say generally, it's not just us who's pushing it. I'll have, some of my coworkers, I'll have Robin or Anne or various people kind of bring me things or get excited about certain artists or be like, have you seen this? Or we'll kind of share stuff together. So it's really a collaborative effort. And I mean, good music is good music. And I think everyone on my team can recognize that and hear that. And if I, show them a song or say this absolutely belongs on our end of year list, like this is the best stuff there is. They're really receptive to that and usually can hear it as well.
Amazing. Aaron, if anybody has a question, just feel free to interrupt me or pop it in. Oh, okay, there we go. So let's see. Okay, so Anna. Yeah, okay, so for Anna, what are the hardest parts of normalizing Latin music and being part of something new? Is it hard to be creative and bring new ideas to the table that other peers feel listeners may not be ready for? Thank you, Dia.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I work on a platform. I have podcasts where I can bring whatever I want. It's Latin music focused, and that's one thing. And then there's a Tiny Desk, which obviously has all kinds of different music. And then, I'm regularly on All Songs, regularly, contributing to lists that we have, things like that. And so in those spaces, I think, it's not something that's necessarily on the top of everyone's radars all the time. And then I think it's one, obviously just picking good music and bringing that and saying, like, believe me, like, you will hear this, you will feel this. It doesn't matter if you speak the language. And I think that's way more, way simpler than people think it is. I think most people, especially people who love music or moved by music, will hear something in a really good song, whether they know what's being said or not. I mean, I think, I always say I'm like, musicians are like magicians to me. They've just figured out how to communicate with everyone, regardless of, what's being said or they don't have the science of it, or they don't have some special thing that they figured out. They just know how to share matters of the heart, and anyone can connect with that just sonically. And so there's that. And then I think also, explaining, not being too, feeling like I have to justify things, but just explaining, like Emilio said, if there's a beautiful, like they're pulling from a really cool Fania rhythm that someone wouldn't necessarily understand the history there, or why that music is as special as it is, what it means culturally, historically, or what they're doing that's really so interesting or ingenious or whatever it might be. Like just being able to explain a little bit of that, I think, can go a long way in terms of establishing the importance of an artist or a song.
Amazing. Thank you, Anna. Hope that answers it, Dia. Emilio, I'm curious from the publishing side. How much are your Latin clients on the attentiveness to AI and the dangers it may pose? I know here in Tennessee, they just recently were one of the first states to pass kind of like an anti-AI kind of like songwriting thing. Obviously this is a songwriter's town, so gotta protect that at its core. Have you found in publishing, Emilio, that your Latin clients are already paying attention to that a little bit?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, they are definitely exploiting it. Creators are always ahead of legal frameworks. They are way ahead. And I 2 weeks ago I took a lecture at NYU with the U.S. Copyright Registrar and NMPA's CEO regarding the latest on AI. It was so interesting. But as of now, what we are seeing is that they are using it as a tool, because they know that in order for a publisher like us to receive something that has AI on it, we definitely cannot do anything with the AI part regarding the protection, monetization, and defense of that. So I think that it's something that we are just educating all the time, letting them know that if they use it for just putting the voice of Karol G or whoever and inspire themselves to write in some nice music, well, that we don't have an issue with the way that they get inspired. But as far as making it the official thing, or including it on their official what we call delivery obligations, it's definitely something that we don't we don't necessarily agree with. We are very as any other publisher, we are always forcing the creators to develop their own voice, and just keep on pushing the limits of the creation and the imagination. We're always pushing to create the next trends on the musical landscape and the tastes that of the future. So I don't know if sincerely AI is going to help us much on that, other than just being a tool or an inspirational thing. But they know well that we are very very intense when it comes to the deliveries with samples or AI content. So we just keep on educating, and all the publishers are pretty much doing the same. The Copyright Office says that they will limit any registration regarding the AI content, so they will only accept the material that is done by a human, basically.
Yeah. Well, we have another question here for you, Emilio, and for Anamaria. What do you think we should expect to hear more of? What may English-speaking listeners begin to hear a wave of and start to really enjoy within the many Latin genres?
Anamaria.
I'm like Emilio.
Ladies first.
I think one is we're gonna see before anything else, maybe a lot more collaboration. I think what I'm seeing shifts in is like I said, you're seeing like your Cariños who are doing all kinds of stuff in the country space. I've heard of all kinds of people in in the industry working on collaborations within kind of like what we see as more like traditionally American genres, whatever that might be. So country spaces like that. So I think we're going to see a lot of blending. There's been a lot of blending across Latin America in the past few years, many years, but I think we're going to see that across the border more. I think also I'm seeing a bit more of pickup on the indie scene. I think Emilio, you mentioned a few artists and kind of like that typical Latin indie space, indie rock, that kind of stuff. I'm seeing more and more popularity there. Definitely like artists being able to sell out bigger venues, do full US tours, things like that hadn't really been anything in the past. So I think it's a little bit of those, you first had artists like, let's say like Caliuchis, who's a good example of, she's like indie, but is really mainstream pop, but very much, gathered a lot of energy around her project. And then you have like an Omar Apollo who's indie, but really like lives more in the English speaking space for the most part. So that was kind of like, to me, the initial breakout there. And now, like I mentioned, you have an artist, a band like La Guayana who did a whole US tour, who's a puro like Venezuelan band living in Mexico City, making kind of like not your typical pop tracks. They had their last album was a little more poppy, but not at all like squarely in that space. And so you're gonna, I think, continue to see more of that on the rise.
That's amazing. I would only add on my personal experience that what we are working, I'm always trying to defy the limits of the creators. As I told you guys, I'm a musician myself, so I know how to defy producers to explore new things. So what we are building now is we're doing camps with companies in France, Nigerian companies. We are going to places that we've never gone before, and just trying to create the new sounds. We're exploring always. It's part of, I think, any good music publisher has to always be kind of on that exploration with their clients. And it's a very, very complex endeavor, but I think it's gonna be worth it. And what can you expect? I think that you'll see Latin creators working with people from other places that we've never seen before. I wish we can do an Iceland Latin kind of mix someday. And we are just crazy about exploring and opening our barriers to new things. I think it has to be done, and it's important that we as companies get up on that challenge.
Yeah, and just to add a couple of my 2 cents to that one before the next question, Music Row, by the way, for the audience that doesn't know what Music Row is the heart of like the music industry in Nashville. It's where a bunch like RCA Studio was there, where a lot of like classic recordings is where everything started there. And if you would have told me years ago that, the same street where the names you heard were like, white names like Dolly Parton or Waylon Jennings or the Isley Brothers, you would have songwriting camps, which is what's happening now. Warner organized a songwriting camp 6 months ago, a Latin songwriting camp, and you would have Brad Paisley, the all-American country singer, in the same room as Piso 21 from Medellin, a hip-hop duo, just kind of like collaborating on ideas with translators, and that happened, and that's happening. I mean, I would have thought you were crazy. But I think you're going to start seeing some really alchemic and interesting kind of sounds coming out of Nashville out into the world.
Yeah. We were on Music Row a few weeks ago. arranging a song camp,
There we go.
and we are going to Nashville now with our Latin creators to do a country music with Latino kind of
Exactly.
experiment.
There we go.
And we worked with Warner Publishing on that camp also in Miami, and it's I think it had to be done at some point. I think that the publishing companies um, uh, uh, understood that it was a feat to be done, and now it's important that we just continue to empower that, and just and not for the sake of creating just a thing. We I think there has to be a curated intention behind all of this. There has to be a naturality, an organic, mindful, thing behind. So,
Sure.
I'm, but I'm very happy that it's happening. I'm sure it's going to bring a lot of interesting things to the table.
Absolutely. Well, I think you have time for one more question, and I think that Evan and Hugo, we can kind of mold their questions into one. And they are asking about kind of from the European side of things. What do we think about the impact of Latin's music emergence into multi-genres on the European market, and maybe putting some EDM there into the equation as well? Do we see some convergence in that? I don't know if Anna or Emilio, you have something to add there.
Anna, do you want to answer it?
No, I mean, honestly, it's something that I actually feel like I know less about, that I've been really curious to understand more, what is the expansion within the European market. Obviously, Spain is its own thing, which
Yes.
is very much relevant in the Latin music space. I think of a lot of Spanish producers and artists as being some top innovators in the genre right now. I think there's a benefit to a bit of like a geographic removal that allows them to sometimes be a little bit less beholden to like American pop standards, things like that. So I see a lot of experimentation there, a lot of incorporation of sounds from that peninsula, flamenco, more Arab influences in their music. So there's that piece of it. And then beyond that, I have been curious about what the presence of Latin music has been across Europe. I hear things about, regional being played in Germany, let's say, or whatever.
Yeah,
I think
that's what I wanted to say. Like, on my experience here in the company and the data that we have, definitely Germany, and it kind of all depends on whether the music, that the Latin music that we're referring to is something danceable or not. I don't know if that's a word, but if you can dance to it with and that's what happens with trap and Latin trapeton. It's that it's natural for people from mainland U.S., Germany, France, and everywhere to dance to it on the nightclubs. But it's difficult. It's different when it's something that it's Latin made, but not necessarily something that you dance to on a cultural level. So I think that it's our way of seeing things is that really nightclubs have a lot to do with the way that you leverage a global presence. And I remember, as Jamie said, Jennifer Lopez, a lot of the hit songs that she made 10 years ago, 15 years ago, were playing in the clubs in Germany. So that's what is happening again, but with a different sound. And now it's not made in New York; it's made with Chilean producers or Mexican producers or Dominican producers, and it's being played all over the place. Our number one hit, global hit, was made by a 21, 22-year-old Venezuelan producer in a very remote area, very humble area of Venezuela. And his song was 1 year later, it was playing all over the world, in all kinds of nightclubs, really. So I think it's a factor, and whether I would expect that European countries that are inclined to that kind of music and that kind of trap music are the ones that are definitely exploiting more the Latin music.
The other thing that I'll quickly add is we did a really lovely interview with Sima Funk, who blends kind of like American hip hop sound and more
He's
like
wonderful,
Cuban sounds. And one of the really interesting things he mentioned, he tours all over the world, and he said there's a difference in terms of what you're talking about, danceability, Emilio. There's a difference in terms of what gets people dancing on this continent versus in Europe, and it's a difference between dancing on the 1 and the 3 and the 2 and the 4. And so I think so there is a really interesting actual like sonic thing happening of like how to integrate across the ocean when you're making danceable beats that are speaking to a more American sensibility in terms of like literal movement versus in Europe. But I have known a number of artists who have successfully kind of like started to build an audience over there. So I think it's that, and of course, there's like Afrobeats are another huge explosion that's happening that we're seeing integrating here and also in Europe. And so can't talk about Latin music without talking about the continent of Africa, obviously, salsa, cumbia, etc. And now with that too, I think that's like another modern bridge through the European continent.
Amazing. Emilio and Anamaria, you guys were amazing, and thanks to the audience for the great questions. I mean, this is something that is going to continue to evolve for many years. Nicole?
Hi, thank you guys so very much. I want you to mark your calendars for April of 2025, because I think what I'm hearing you guys talk about, there's so much innovation and so much collaboration that I think that we should meet again in a year, and we should see where we stand, because I think it's going to be a completely different conversation than you guys just had here today. So I'm excited to see where it goes for sure. And I think everybody in the audience was as well. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Anamaria, Emilio, and Jamie, for sharing your insights. And we will see everybody back here May 7th. We have Illuminate, who will be presenting Grow and Go Global, New Music Discovery Trends at the International Level. So we'll see you back here May 7th, and we will see the 3 of you back here in May of 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.